In this video, I'm going to talk about how you can take materials like this old beam, old closet doors, or maybe a wood slab and easily turn them into decorative tables in your house. I hope you enjoy. So the first of the two tables is going to be the one I do from the closet door. My design is a basic A-frame leg. I'm going to do one on each side. Because this table's decorative and it's not going to have any weight on it or anything like that, I'm not worried about running a stretcher or have any kind of skirt for additional support. The legs mounted to the top should be good enough. The main component of the legs are going to be these, they were 2x2 inch square red oak boards that I had. They've been milled down to about 1.5 by 1.5, but they've been on the shelf for a long time. So I did a couple measurements and tried to find the two that went best with one another. Then after I felt pretty good about how they were going to lay it out, I went ahead and marked them up. The key to a project like this is making sure that you know which side of the leg is the face, which side is the top, which side is the bottom, which side's left and right, so that you don't accidentally cut something the wrong way and then you have to start over from scratch. After I had everything marked up, I just did a real quick decorative cut. I didn't have to be super precise on this because what I ended up doing was clamping the legs together after and using a sander to get a consistent finish on them. A lot of this build was just about close enough, you know, cut once and then cut the other three to match that one. So what I'm doing here is I'm cutting the horizontal boards that make the top and the center support for the legs. I always try to cut knots and stuff off so that I don't try to tempt myself into using that later on. After I got 4 pieces that were the right length, like I said, I just lined them all up even and cut across so that I know all 4 are going to be the same length. Then after I got all my pieces cut, meaning my 2 legs and then the 2 supports for each leg, I brought them inside for assembly. I'm using dominoes for assembly here, but you could have used pocket hole screws, you could have done dowel construction, you could have cut notches and recessed the supports in the legs, but I have a domino, so why not use it? What I did here was I just connected one across the top and then I eyeballed where I thought the second support should go. I picked about 10 inches down and went ahead and cut the dominoes for those as well. But you can see all the marks I have on the board, and again, that's so that I can make sure that this is one side and it's the left front and this is the left back and then this is the right front and the right back, and I don't accidentally cut the domino on the wrong side. The supports are going to be flush mounted on the outside of the leg, and so there was room for error if I accidentally cut the domino on the inside or the outside. After I got the dominoes cut, I went ahead and just glued everything in place. Basically just put glue in the hole on the domino, did it on both legs, and then clamped them together. I did this earlier in the day, clamped them up, and I let them dry for about 12 hours before I moved on to the next part of the build. It wasn't super important for them to sit up for 24 hours because, again, this is a decorative table. It's not going to be weight bearing. It's not going to need to have a whole lot of rigidity to it. So once I knew that the glue had gotten to a decent dried part, I could move on to the next part of the build process. When I have simple glue ups like this, I always try to go ahead and scrape off the excess glue. Normally you can let it dry for a little while and then maybe clean it up later, but I just didn't want to have to do a bunch of extra sanding in the corners. A part of the whole design was I wanted to match the square edges of this door that you can see on the table here, and so it was important to me that the legs kept those sharp corners to match the design of the table. Just like I used the dominoes to assemble the legs, I came back later that night, this is probably after 8 or 10 hours, and I went ahead and attached them to the tabletop using the same thing, dominoes. I used 5mm dominoes for the legs. These are 8mm dominoes into the tabletop. I just clamped a board, a straight edge on, so that I had a reference point, and then went ahead and cut the dominoes, making sure that my cut didn't run a risk of going all the way through the table. I clamped it up, let it dry overnight, and then I came out the next morning to do the final prep to finish this quick table project. Now, I didn't want to spend too much time sanding. The main thing I'm trying to get off is just my pencil marks. I do like using those white chalk pencils, but if you don't get the marks off, sometimes your finish or your stain won't soak in. So I'm trying to get all the pencil off, all the chalk marks off, and then any glue that might have ran out. Just real light passes. I was using a 220 paper here, and I tried to make sure that I didn't round over any of those corners so that we kept a nice sharp edge look. Then that's it. I just roughed the table up so that it would take this poly. I did a spray clear coat over it, 3 or 4 coats out in the sun, let it dry, and then I called my friend to come pick it up. The table came out really great, and this was a quick project I finished in a few hours. Now here's the second build. I'm sure you can tell from my hair and that horrible bald spot that this was earlier in the year. I made another end table out of this pine beam. The beam was very weathered. It was in rough shape. My first job was to kind of get that gnarled coat off, that weather-worn coat off, and get a nice square side going. I used a hand plane for most of this, accompanied with a sander. I'm not really an expert in hand planing, so excuse my style. But if you've never used a hand plane, they're kind of fun. It's nice seeing those shavings, and it's definitely good exercise. After I did what I thought I could do with the planer, I just came back over it with my Rotex. I'm using 110 grit sandpaper here just to try to clean it up. Then I came outside. I have an angle grinder here with a flapper disc attachment. This one side of the beam and the other side actually had some bad rot, so I'm just using the flapper disc to get all this loose stuff out. There's no way I can save it. I'm not pouring a bunch of epoxy into this because it's actually going to be up against the wall. You won't even see it, so I'm just trying to get any loose stuff out so that the wood I'm left with is nice, solid wood. This is the opposite side. This is going to be the side that I'm actually going to use for the top. I'm using a ice pick from High Caliber Craftsman and a vacuum to clean out any dirt or gunk or grime out of that. And then I had to flatten the 2 edges. I cut these with a handsaw. I thought I did a pretty good job, but they weren't perfectly square. I made a quick jig out of some 2x4s that I knew were straight, clamped them on here using a level, and then I just took my palm router and a piece of acrylic that I had and made a poor man's router sled. Now the legs for this table were actually toolbox legs that I didn't put on the toolbox. So what I'm doing here is drilling some holes and putting some insert nuts. Anytime you have a heavy table like this, you don't want to necessarily drill or screw the legs into, because if weight shifts back and forth, you'll eventually cause some wobble. So I add the insert nuts here. That way the legs are removable and I've got a little better connection to the wood than just having a screw eating into the meat of the wood here. I'm putting them in by pre-drilling the hole, and then I added some super glue and then just tighten them in with the appropriate Allen wrench. This was the last side of the board. This one is going to be facing out in the room, so opposite of the wall. It had this crack in it, which I actually thought was kind of a nice feature piece, but I needed to get, again, all the loose stuff out. I wanted just good wood left. So I mainly used a chisel and a hammer, and I just put some good tunes on and scraped all this stuff out, used the vacuum when I needed to get it all out, and then I made some wood bow ties that I attach here in a minute. Now, that part I cleaned out earlier with the ice pick, I was going to fill this with epoxy, but I didn't want to pour a ton of epoxy. So to fill up some of that void, I had some of this crushed turquoise that I thought would add a nice accent color. So my buddy here, Chris, is pouring the turquoise into the crack, and then I'm coming behind him with a blue tinted or turquoise tinted epoxy that we fill in. You'll see the red tape on the end. That was just to try to stop anything from running over the sides. In the end, I probably didn't get the best seal with the tape. I should have done silicone because I did have some leak out on the front end. But overall, this did a really good job of filling in the voids and leading to a flat surface that would ultimately become my tabletop. Now you see me using the paint stick to kind of coax the epoxy around. Ultimately, dried epoxies are really hard, turquoise stones are really hard, and I didn't want to get in a situation where sanding these hard substances led to divots in the wood on the top. So I tried to do my best to keep things floated out and as flat as possible, use the heat gun to pop bubbles when they came up, and finish the top. I ended up using Total Boat's Halcyon to clear coat the entire project when it was done, and the last step was adding an inductive phone charger to the top. I did this by started off with a hole saw bit and then eventually just had to use a chisel to pop down and get the depth I needed. The inductive charger is really cool. It's got a top that you can set your phone or device on, but you can also flip the top out the way, and it has a plug for USB or traditional outlet. So what we've got here is the final result of the two table projects I worked on in this video. First up, we've got the beam. It's got the integrated phone charger here with the plugs and USB adapters. We've got the decorative bow ties and then the turquoise inlay on top. all done with a Total Boat product to seal it all in. We've got the short legs on it. It's very heavy, but it's still pretty sturdy. I'm not worried about it being a tip hazard because it's gonna go, and was designed to go, between the arm of the couch and the wall back here. So those two will hold it in place. Then we've got the second table that was a project for a friend. She had this old door off of a closet. We added these real simple legs to it, tried to match kind of the angular design of the table, went with the same type of wood to where it really blends in well. She's using this to go along a long wall to hide some cables and plugs that otherwise you would see. She'll put some throw pillows on top, like we've got one there. It's more than robust enough for stuff like that to be decorative, maybe some baskets underneath, and we've got two easy, simple projects made from materials that otherwise would have been thrown away. So thanks for watching the video.